If you're a parent, you've probably wrestled with the question, am I really cut out for this? The fear that you'll be the one responsible for messing your kid up. And in your desperation, you search online, scroll through endless videos, and land on posts stamped with the words evidence-based. It reassures you they must know what they're talking about. And they do. Most of the advice is evidence-based, except it's built on the wrong goal. And if you don't know the difference, you can end up with a child who behaves on the outside but feels unseen and unsafe on the inside. One could argue that because of the unique challenges we face in the modern world, parenting has never been harder. A high cost of living, limited support networks, especially in big cities, and an online world that threatens your child's very sense of self. Many of these conditions didn't exist a generation ago, but here we are. And for a crisis this widespread, we knew we needed to sit down with the preeminent voice on parenting today. Dr. Becky Kennedy is Ivy League trained with years of private practice and now leads a parenting revolution online. For millions of parents, she's acted as a lifeline, translating the science of child development into language that feels both practical and deeply human. If you're new to Mighty Pursuit, we exist to help you make sense of the whole person, mind, body, and spirit, not as vague wellness cliches, but as deeply interconnected parts of your everyday experience. We believe putting the whole person back together is the key to living well. Today's episode zooms into our wisdom category, asking what it really means to raise kids well in the 21st century. And by the end, you won't just feel more equipped as a parent, you'll see your role in a completely new light. I wanted you to imagine this scenario. So pretend it's 8:30 in the morning, you're exhausted, late for work, and your 3-year-old is lying face down on the kitchen floor, screaming because you poured her cereal in the blue bowl instead of the red bowl. And before you can stop yourself, you kind of snap and you say, "You make my life miserable," to the kid. So the whole rest of the day, you can't stop thinking about that and wondering if you are cut out to be a parent. So how do you make sense of that moment when someone's in conflict with their own ability as a parent, and wonder if they're even qualified to do it?
Well, first of all, I think you just painted such a powerful story, and it is the story that happens to every parent, where there's a moment where our capacity as a parent to kind of manage the moment the way we might want to is just not something we can access. We have a reaction. We then, very importantly, what you did, we then tell ourselves the story that in some ways that one moment is symbolic of our parenting abilities or of our worth, or we tell ourselves the story that that one moment with our kid is predictive of how our kid is going to be at age 18 and 48, right? And then all of a sudden we are so stuck and we feel frozen in shame, honestly, about the enormity of our error or of our lack of capacity or that something's wrong with our kid. And then in a way, we are actually so far away from the moment itself, because what we're really responding to is the way we talk to ourselves about that moment. So your question is a good one. It's kind of the essence of everything, but I want to break down a few parts of it. So number one, we can talk about what's really going on for a 3-year-old when they melt down, like what's really happening there. Number two, what's going on when I yell at my kid when I don't want to? And then how can I talk to myself after, knowing every parent has that moment, and I put myself in that category. Like people often say, like, every parent but you. No, every parent, me too. Of course, I yell things at my kids that I don't want to yell. And what can we do after we are the human parent who's kind of messed up? So is it okay? Can we break down all three?
Yeah.
Okay, let's actually start with the repair after, because it's actually the most important thing. Every parent yells. Every parent reaches a point of kind of, oh my goodness, I did not act the way I wanted to. And what I think is so important for parents to know is the single most important parenting strategy to kind of get good at is repair. And you literally can't repair if you haven't messed up. So the only way to get good at the most important parenting strategy is to have the precondition of messing up. So I hope every parent listening can breathe and say, oh, okay, so that's just step one. Once I yell, I can then do the most important thing. It's actually not being yelled at that kind of, quote, messes up kids. What messes up kids is being yelled at and then not having that moment repaired. It's being alone with your scared emotions and with your own coping capacities, which as a 3-year-old aren't fantastic, to try to make sense of that moment. And so repair allows you to help your kid and actually help them understand that in every relationship, people do things they're not proud of, but you can expect in a healthy relationship for people to take responsibility for their behavior and come back to kind of take that accountability and help reconnect.
Yeah.
So that's so important, which means you yell at your kid. And when you're telling yourself, I'm such an awful person and I'm not cut out to be a parent, like just hopefully you can start to say, hi, just say hi to that. High critical voice, right out of IFS, internal family systems. High critical voice, I hear you, and I am not my latest behavior. That moment doesn't define me. It's never too late. I can repair. Because when we go back to our kid and say, hey, you're having a hard time this morning. I yelled at you. That probably felt scary. Let me try that again. I love you. Something like that. You really soften the impact of that moment. And so that to me is so empowering and important for parents to understand. Second, why do we yell in the first place? Parents often say to me, well, how can I just not yell at my kid in that morning, right? How do I not yell when my kid, kind of has a meltdown when we have to actually leave for school? Now, there are small things we can do. We can talk about that. But too often we focus on the wrong thing as a parent. It's like if you said to me, Becky, how do I not have my car fall off a cliff when my car is kind of hanging over a cliff? My question back to you is, well, why is your car on the cliff so often? Like, can we get your car off the road before you get to the cliff? So much of why we end up yelling at our kid at 8:30 in the morning actually has to do with, I don't know, did we put ourselves to sleep at a good time? Did we get sleep? Do we have the support we need? Do we understand what a kid needs to get out of the house, on a short timeline? And so we want to rewind a little bit. And then the first thing is, what's really going on for our kid when they have that meltdown? And this, I think, is so important and probably underlies so much of what I think we help parents with at Good Inside. Mm-hmm. One of the most important things to learn as a parent is how to decode your kid's behavior, is how to look at behavior on the surface and try to think about what might really be happening under the surface. And honestly, it's probably the same in adult relationships. When your kid is crying, oh, not in the blue bowl, I hate the blue bowl, even though yesterday they only wanted the blue bowl, that's how it goes. To some degree, what they're saying is, this morning isn't going the way I wanted it to. I'm nervous about saying goodbye to you at school, and I'm a smart cookie, so I know the best way to delay that goodbye is to just kind of not really leave the house. Or there's so many things out of my control, and already I woke up when I didn't want to wake up. I had to wear an outfit I didn't want to wear. I was told I wasn't brushing my teeth the right way. I was told my shirt is wrong. And now when you say, here's your boo bowl, it's just representative of, oh my goodness, I can't deal with one more thing feeling like it's outside my control. And so I think those three things are probably always helpful when things go off the rails. What's really going on with my kid? What's really going on with me? And can I remind myself every time that I don't have to be a perfect parent? I can be a parent who repairs.
Yeah, I mean, we spoke a little bit about this offline, but there seems to be like when you're parenting, you are it's like you're managing yourself and your own emotions, and you're managing your kid at the same time, and that can feel very complex. If someone's like coming into this and they feel like they never had a model of what you're talking about right now in their own.
Yeah.
At what level do we need to like repair with ourselves and repair like our past experiences? And now we're going in this without any sort of backing from what we had in our past.
It's such a good question. And to that parent who's listening, I just say, welcome. Like, your timing is perfect. Your timing is impeccable. Parenthood, to me, we have a false narrative about it. Yes, it's about raising our kids. I'm not going to say it's not, but parenthood at its best is about re-raising ourselves. And we're kind of confronted by all of these things that were unresolved in our own childhood when we have kids, because we just watch themselves get acted out. Like, oh, my kid has a tantrum, and no parent likes a tantrum. But if I'm unable to stay relatively calm during a tantrum, that probably predated my kid being born. It's probably hard for me to manage frustration or, big displays of emotion. And so most parents, I would say, are on a journey after having a kid of learning coping skills for their own internal emotional life. And so the parent listening, I just want them to know, like, you're not behind. That actually is the journey. Because parenting, in some ways, it's like being asked to coach a basketball team when you've never played basketball. And what's different about that is there's this idea in the world that parenting should just come naturally. Like if I told you I'd coach a basketball team, I've never played basketball, I've never read about basketball, I've never watched basketball, I think you'd say to me, well, Becky, that sounds like a tough gig that someone signed you up for. And you can do hard things. Let's start. Let's watch a game together. Why don't you talk to someone who plays basketball? There's books about basketball. Maybe start by reading the rules, right? And I think I say, oh, yeah, there's knowledge out there. Knowledge is power. Let me kind of get my knowledge to feel more empowered. With parenting, we're told it should come naturally. You should just know. Think about how awful I would feel as a basketball coach if people told me all the time, you should just know how to do it. Then every time I was with my team, I would feel like something was wrong with me. So to me, kind of parents feeling more empowered and feeling like it's okay to not have had a model, it's okay to be a little bit learning on the job, that all becomes a little easier to digest if we can also tell ourselves, I'm supposed to get resources. I'm supposed to learn. I'm supposed to lean on other people through this journey.
Really struck me when you said that, like the idea like parenting should come naturally. I wonder, like, I love looking at data and stuff like that. And so when you start to see things like declining birth rates and all that stuff, or avoiding it, obviously there's a lot of reasons for that. And the fact that, high cost of living and childcare, all these different things. But I don't know. I wonder how much of that is emotional of like, I need to be in like the perfect place to be able to raise a kid. And if I'm not, then I don't know if you are seeing that at all.
I think you're talking about the declining birth rate. There are larger sociological factors. Exactly. Yeah. Cost of living, cost of childcare. I think a lot of people look at, what do I make? What does childcare cost? These two things, literally the math doesn't math. So, that's just not a possibility. On the more psychological, individual kind of view, I think I do hear from a lot of people, like, this looks really hard, this whole parenting thing. And it doesn't look like there's a lot of support. Mm-hmm. It doesn't look like there's a lot of systemic support. It doesn't even look like there's a lot of support for, day-to-day education or community, right? And so I think a lot of people feel like the gig is up, right? And to me, I see a more hopeful part of that also. First of all, it's up to any individual, of course, if they want to have kids and what timeline. But certainly when we normalize getting support and education for what is the hardest job in the world, I think that makes it a little bit more enticing to take on.
Yeah, because it seemed like in reading your book, the idea of like, am I cut out for this or am I ruining my kid seemed to be like two of the most common types of mentalities that parents like carry around.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that, again, does come from this lore of maternal instinct. And to be clear, I know you read my book. I'm a big believer that multiple things can be true. Yeah. There are some things with your kid that comes naturally, 100%. But there is a lot that does not come naturally. Like when your kid is having a tantrum in a grocery store, when your kid yells, I hate you, you've never done anything for me, after, I don't know, you just spent the whole day doing things for them. When your kid lies to your face, the idea that it comes naturally how to respond in a way you're proud of, it's absurd because the only thing that comes naturally in parenting is how you were parented. So instinct for anything, instinct is what you've learned up until that point. And we don't glamorize it in other places. I'm sure you've talked to various CEOs of companies. Nobody says, I have a CEO instinct. I've learned everything I need to know. I don't like executive coaches. I don't like to read. I don't like to learn from mentors. Nobody's ever said that. They probably say there's something that got me here. And of course, I'm open to learning and growing. This doesn't completely come naturally. And then we all say to that CEO leader, that's the leader I want. I think that's the picture we want to paint for Good Inside and our parenting approach. Some things come naturally, a lot doesn't. And just like in any other kind of job or area that, is a challenging thing to do, we can get education, we can get support, and we have to practice, right? And I just want to kind of normalize that for parents.
Yeah, I mean, I think people obviously need support. They need a guide. They need to figure out how to do it. And I think in people's desperation, the only thing they know to do is like, okay, let me Google something online. Okay, what should I do in these situations? And one thing I took from your work is like they'll come across things that say like this is evidence-based. Mm-hmm. And so how would you coach people who might not know how to do these things they're trying to figure out when they come across things that say like evidence-based online?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're just pointing to a more general trend around suspicion around what you read on the internet, right? So is this evidence-based? What does that mean? What's the evidence, And evidence-based is tricky, I mean, I remember once talking to a supervisor as I was trying to unpack my own thoughts about parenting, right? There's so much evidence, for example, that punishment, can change behavior, at least in the short term. But I remember my supervisor saying to me, if you had a kid who talked back to a parent and you made that kid sleep on the New York City streets for, every time they talk back, you'd probably get evidence that the behavior changed. But I don't know if that's evidence to be proud of or evidence that you'd want to use, right? And so I think like anything else, we're talking about how can we become just more thoughtful consumers of things that we read and have a little bit of skepticism. That's number one. Number two, I think what's really tricky, one of the things that's really tricky about parenting is there's guidance that we get that makes us feel like we're mimicking someone else or just we're trying on someone else's voice. And then there's guidance that we get that helps us feel like we're accessing something inside of ourselves, right? That maybe felt distant, but it just feels right, even if it's a little uncomfortable because it's new. I think sometimes that's our best guide as we're learning. Anything new is going to feel uncomfortable. So you're going to feel uncomfortable. But I tell parents all the time, there's a million things you could read online, but you should check in with yourself. Does this feel right? Is this the version of a parent I kind of could have used or that actually feels like the version of myself I want to be? No, nothing you read is going to tell you that. It's going to give you information, but you need to combine that information to kind of, in some ways, the data in the inside of your body. And to me, the combination of the two is the best guide.
Yeah, because when I think about myself, even a lot of what I would naturally do when I read through your book and all the different strategies and situational reactions I might have, it seems like in some ways it's counterintuitive. Now, I don't know if that's because of what I've digested over all my time on earth about what a good parenting is, but is there an element of unlearning that someone needs to do about, because if my natural thing is like, I need to punish you right now, not, oh wow, they want to pick they want the blue bowl right now because of all the psychological reasons that they might be wanting me to stay with them. How do you work through that, like an unlearning, like that whole process?
Yeah, I think that's kind of what a lot of parenting is, right? Is trying to figure out my natural reaction in a situation. Is that something that continues to feel right? Or is that just the easiest thing because it was wired in me earliest based on probably what all the generations did before me, who were definitely doing the best with the resources they had, right? So let's take this example. Let's go back to the blue bowl. So my kid throws down the blue bowl and the milk and the Cheerios are like all over the place. And they're like, I'm not eating unless you give me the red bowl. Give me the bowl right now. Most parents I know, their immediate reaction would be yelling, would be anything that's in the vein of shut this down right now, which usually sounds like a punishment or a threat that, by the way, we tend not to keep. Get up right now and, I don't know, lick the Cheerios from the floor or no dessert tonight. We don't even really know what we're saying. But essentially what our body is doing in that moment is it's kind of saying, what do I know about big displays of emotions? Do I know that those things can be safe enough to work through? Were those things shut down super fast with fear when I was growing up? And even if I don't literally remember, my body will probably tell me what the likely reaction was. So let's assume you're thinking, yeah, that happened in my house. Like that would have been a scary situation, right? Sent to my room, lecture, I was hit, I don't know, whatever it was, right? Of course, your body is going to have the instinct to do the same thing because your body's basing that instinct and that instinctual reaction on memory and experience. That's everything you learned. Now, if you're saying, I've rethought it. When I'm calm, I wonder, well, why is my kid freaking out? It doesn't mean, by the way, if I understand my kid's behavior, and this is so important, understanding your kid's behavior is not the same thing as reinforcing or permitting that behavior. trying to understand, well, why is my kid throwing it? They're having a hard time. A lot feels out of control. They're nervous about going to school. I can say to my kid, oh, breakfast is really hard this morning. You really wish you had the Red Bull. And by the way, I could continue to hold the boundary. That's breakfast. I don't know, the Red Bull's dirty. It's not available. I can re-pour some cereal for you in the blue bowl, or you could go to school without having breakfast. Those are really the only options, sweetie. We're going to get through this together. I think when people imagine, oh, you're not punishing your kid, they imagine that you're running in hoops and kind of creating all of these permissive situations to kind of let your kid's emotions win. I think my whole pitch is that understanding what's underneath behavior allows you to learn what skills your kid needs to learn so that they can actually change their behavior. What skill might be missing? The skill of tolerating frustration. Oh, it's not the bowl I wanted. Maybe it's the skill of using words to express yourself instead of actions, which, by the way, some adults still don't have that skill. So let's say that's it. I might say, whoa, you really wish you had a different bowl. Next time, you can tell me, I don't like blue. Let's even practice that. Maybe the next morning I remember it and I say, look, we're about to go outside and have breakfast. Your sister has the red bowl. You have the blue bowl. Oh, is that a bummer? Do you feel happy about it or like really upset? I feel really upset. I'm so glad you told me. The blue bowl still is the only one available. Do you still want cereal or do you want to skip it today? Most kids after will be like, oh, I'll have it because they just feel seen and understood. And now all of a sudden, I've taught my kid a skill, not just to get through breakfast, but you know what? That kid is going to be more likely in school that day to say, I want the fire truck instead of smacking the 3-year-old next to them because they're learning how to verbalize what's actually happening for them. And so I think the process of kind of unlearning is kind of a multi-step process. First of all, you have to probably do some amount of reading or digesting to say, well, how would I want to respond in that situation? I don't want to just yell at my kid. Okay, so what do I have to do next? Okay, I probably have to, in that moment, literally put a Post-it, I don't know, up in my kitchen saying, take a deep breath, you can do this. Or one of my favorite skills to teach parents is just teaching them a different lens to look at your kid's behavior. What's the most generous interpretation? What is the MGI of my kid having a tantrum in the morning? Most of us have naturally been wired with the least generous interpretation, right? We see our kid as the enemy. We think that they're ungrateful. Of course, you're going to punish a kid like that. When you can learn a skill as an adult, like what's the most generous interpretation? Now I actually see the situation different. I see, oh, I have a good kid having a hard time, not a bad kid doing bad things. And then I'll probably start over time to have a different reaction from there.
One of the most natural fears in that situation would be if I let this tantrum continue, then this is going to make my kid just like emotionally dysregulated as an adult and entitled and not be able to, it kind of in this weird way that they wouldn't be resilient if they feel like they're always going to get what they want.
100%. And so I think that is a very common fear. And I empathize with parents because if they're thinking, hold on a second, if I don't punish this tantrum, I'm reinforcing it. And I don't want to have one of those 18-year-olds who's having a tantrum when they're online at a coffee store because they never learned how to wait. Just what I want to say directly to that parent is, I'm in agreement with you. I don't want you to have that 18-year-old. I don't want me to have that 18-year-old. I actually don't want the world to have that 18-year-old. The irony is we have to actually understand the path to becoming an adult who can handle hard things, becoming an adult who's not entitled. And so to me, a metaphor often helps. Everyone I know wants their kid to be able to swim. Right? It's like a safety issue. I want my kid to learn how to swim, or maybe even I want my kid to even know how to swim in the ocean because, it could be a little more dangerous. But then I think about how we actually teach our kids to swim. Usually, parents are with their kid in some type of training pool. Maybe they even pay for lessons. Mm-hmm. And I picture a parent next to a kid in a pool who can't swim. They're flailing. And I picture the parent kind of, outside the pool saying, Becky, why are you with your kid in the pool when they're flailing? You're basically reinforcing that it's okay not to swim. If you want your kid to be able to swim in the ocean, you have to tell them this is not okay. Go to your room and come back to the pool when you know how to swim. Like, it's obviously absurd. Okay. What is my kid doing in their room that's going to make them able to swim? I mean, they're going to feel shame. They're going to feel angry at me. They're probably less likely now to get back in the pool and learn anything from me. That's just swimming skills. I think we understand how to teach kids how to swim much better than we understand how to teach kids an even more important skill in life, emotion regulation. How do I learn to regulate emotions, which means I have emotions because I can't fight them, but how do I learn how to feel emotions and not be taken over by them? That's what emotion regulation is. I can feel angry at my spouse and not yell at him. I can feel disappointed that I wasn't invited to some group dinner and not text, I don't know, some people on the side about what bitches these other women are. Like, that's just acting out. I can just say, I'm disappointed. I'm upset that you did that. I'm angry. I can use my emotions as information to make better decisions as opposed to my emotions taking over me and making my decisions. We can't learn to regulate emotions that we're not allowed to have. You have to feel like it's okay to have an emotion before you learn how to manage that emotion. So here's a kid having a tantrum. Go to your room. We don't act like this. I agree. I don't love a tantrum. But all a tantrum is a kid's way of saying, my feelings are greater than my skills to manage those feelings. And when you punish kids, here's the irony. You literally just widen the gap. Now I've added more anger, more resentment, more shame. My kid has no skill to manage those feelings. If you have a people-pleasing kid, which only some kids are, they're usually the first kids, you might see a reduction in tantrums simply because they're terrified. They're so scared of you because they want your approval. By the way, fear runs out. Those kids, when they're teens, they're kind of like, I'm not really scared of you, and I still have the skills of a 1-year-old, and we're not connected, so now I'm just going to act out and refuse to go to school and not follow curfew, right? Or you have kids who aren't people pleasers and we see these kids all the time, every time you punish them, they just act out more. Yeah. They just feel more out of control because they're not connected to you and they're not learning skills.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that was most helpful in your book is the understanding the development of a child's brain.
Yes.
And what they're capable of emotionally, and that part of the brain being developed versus what an adult would in that situation. Could you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah. So in these moments when you see a young kid having a tantrum, which often is triggered by a totally ridiculous situation to an adult, like you can have 2 toppings on your ice cream instead of 3 toppings, and my kid is just apoplectic, tantruming on the floor. What's really happening for a child and what happens in toddler and early childhood development is a kid's prefrontal cortex, which is the part of their brain that can think about long-term decisions, that can even think, okay, rationally, 2 toppings is better than 3 toppings. That is completely underdeveloped. They literally don't have that kick in. And when emotions run high, they have no access to it. So they are in pure kind of what Dan Siegel calls downstairs brain, or people call lizard brain. And if someone hears lizard brain, they think it's like a prehistoric, non-sophisticated animal. And I say to parents, exactly. That's exactly what's happening. Your child is pure emotion without any sense of planning or long-term thinking or rationality. That is completely offline. And not only is it offline, but when you pour in rationality and logic, 2 toppings is better than none. It actually just further inflames the emotion system, and the amygdala lights up even more. And so all you get, very counterproductively, is a longer and more intense tantrum. Now, this is one of the hardest things for parents. And what I like to say to parents is, you are right. It is an irrational tantrum. It is also, we don't say this enough to parents, it's just massively inconvenient. You're like, I came home from work early to take my 4-year-old to ice cream, and I'm getting rewarded with a tantrum. Like, this is literally—
in public, yeah.
In public. This is not how I drew up my 5:55 to 6:15 p.m.
Everybody else is looking at you too.
Right. Now, I think we actually misinterpret those looks. I really, really do. I actually think most people are looking at you, if there were parents, like, oh, I remember that stage, that's hard, or, oh, your kid is having a hard time. And even if they're not, we should assume they are, because there's no reason we should make up other people's thoughts in a way that works against us. That's just a silly thing to do. But in those situations for a parent, you can be right or you can be effective. You cannot be both. So if you want to be right, you can use logic. You can say, this is insane, I'm never going to take you to ice cream again, and you are completely right. and you will be completely ineffective. Or you can be effective and you can learn what it is to set a boundary. Sweetie, I'm going to pick you up and carry you out of the ice cream store right now. This is just not going to be a day for ice cream. You're a good kid, having a hard time. There was something about the topping situation that felt bad. We'll figure out another day. No, if I do that, by the way, I'm actually carrying my kid out. And just to make this very clear, if I'm doing that with my 4-year-old, my kid is not saying to me, oh, feels really good, Mom. Thank you. I really needed that boundary and that emotional containment. And you're an amazing mom. No, you know how they're going to reward me even for my good decision in that inconvenient moment? By trying to scratch me or screaming or kicking, because they're in lizard brain and everything they interpret in that moment feels like an attack from, an enemy. So this is where, again, it goes back to education. Because unlike in a job in an office where you get a job description and you're told, here is your job. And then, of course, if you know what your job is, you can do your job well. Unlike that, which has clarity, most parents have never been told, well, what is my job in that situation? If I'm not using my kid's behavior as a way of defining my parenting wins, which, by the way, you shouldn't unless you want to feel horrible about yourself all the time and put your mental health, in the hands of a 4-year-old, I do not suggest. You have to know what your job is. And actually, once you redefine your job and then practice the skills as a parent to do your job well, just like in a job description, it's actually amazing how much changes, because you start to define your parenting wins based on what's under your control and your clarity, not based on kind of your toddler or even your 17-year-old's reaction.
One of the things that you do in your book is like, it's almost like someone speaking Chinese to you, which is what the kid is doing that moment, and you're translating it into English. But in that moment, all you hear, the Chinese, which is like, when a kid says, I hate you so much, you're literally the worst parent in the world.
Yes.
It feels so tempting in that moment to just believe what they're saying.
Yeah.
And it's just such an emotionally intense, heightened moment, especially if there's a lot of screaming, to keep her cool and like be like, wait, no, okay, this is what's really happening. Is that an in the moment thing, or is that I'm doing that type of work outside of that moment and then I'm bringing that mentality into that moment?
It is definitely an outside the moment thing. I don't know anyone who does good psychological work when they're, being told they're a horrible person. But you and I were talking about this earlier. It's no different than the work hopefully a lot of us are doing in our partnerships, which is an adult to an adult. I mean, how many times are we talking with our partner, I don't know, about anything, and our partner's like, you never do anything. You're always coming home later than you said you would from work. And you're like, that's not true. Yesterday I said I'd be home at 6 and I was home at 6. Like, that's going to help in the conversation? No. What your partner is trying to tell you is something else just doesn't feel good. I feel like we have to communicate better. Sometimes I'm trying to reach you and I don't know where you are, and that makes me feel insecure. And now I'm acting out with anger and verbal aggression, but actually it's because I'm terrified of how much I need you. Okay, so many things. So this happens adults to adult, and anyone who's been in a partnership for a while knows one of the things to have a healthy relationship is to learn to start to translate my partner's aggressive words into their fears or into their underlying struggles. That's how you start to communicate better. You realize the words are at the surface, and as soon as things escalate, I can't take the bait of the exact words. I have to translate words into feelings and try to respond to the feeling. This is what we do it's not what we do all the time. It's what we work on doing more often and then repairing for the times that we didn't do it. So with our kid, it's the exact same thing, except our kid is 3 or they're 12. They're not, 40 something, so our kids have even less of a capacity. Plus they're even more dependent on us. They literally can't survive without us. And a lot of us in adult partnerships, we might say, I couldn't survive without my partner, but we literally could, right? Like just from a pure, could we gather food and, shelter much better than our 6-year-old could. So they're much more dependent on us, which makes the attachment relationship much more charged. And they're born with 0 emotion regulation skills. So they are in that kind of lizard brain much more often.
Yeah, I mean, so much what you're saying is in some ways, I'd imagine those thoughts of I'm not cut out for this, or it's my fault that my kid is struggling, also potentially might be reinforced like in the moment when your kid is saying that to you. Because, in an adult situation, if your partner says something really harmful to you, you're probably expecting at some point they're going to like walk that back and like repair with you. Is that similar with a kid, or are you expecting that because of their own emotional regulation that that you might not even get that from your kid and you're going to have to deal with that on your own?
I mean, I think what you're saying really speaks to the core of parenting. Being a sturdy parent, that's the word that always comes to mind. That's what we really work on with parents. It really is about developing a deeper sense of internal validation and self-trust. Because as a parent, the more you know your own intentions, the more you can separate a moment from who you are, the less dependent you are on your 4-year-old to tell you, I'm sorry, Mom. I'm actually just sad that I can't stay up later. You're not really a bad mom after all. Thank you actually for getting me to bed at a good time. And obviously that's like a laughable thing. My 4-year-old, do I want to work toward that? You better bet I care about my kids apologizing and taking accountability. How do we get there? Not by expecting it to happen overnight, by me repairing and modeling it, by helping them manage shame, by helping them regulate their emotions, by showing them that nobody's perfect. And then one day your kid will say that to you. But if you're crossing your fingers and waiting for that as a way to feel good as a parent again, I say to parents all the time, not only is that a bad bet for your own mental health and your relationship with your kid, I just feel like we're betting on the wrong thing. Like I would say to any parent, no offense, I like your kid, even if I don't know your kid, I'm going to bet on you more than your 4-year-old. Like I'm just going to put my money on you as the adult because you're more capable of being a leader, right? And so that's really what parents are. Like we are the pilot of the plane. We have to make decisions sometimes that our passengers don't like. Everyone put your seatbelt on. Oh, I was just going to the bathroom. You're the worst pilot in the world. Can you imagine a pilot saying, I really need you to apologize to me before I can fly the plane straight again? I mean, that would be terrifying. We have to make an emergency landing. No, you're the worst. I have to go to a wedding in California. I'm going to give you a bad Yelp review. No, give me a good review. Please. Like it's so laughable because you're so frightened by the pilot's fragility that in order for them to do their job well, they need something specific from the passenger.
Yeah.
The pilot you want in those situations is a pilot who knows their intention, who knows their job, who knows my job isn't to keep the passengers happy. It's not to get a 5-star review on Yelp. Like that's just not my job. My job is to keep people safe. And because I have more knowledge of a situation than my passengers do, I am sometimes going to make decisions that people are short-term unhappy with, but one day they will probably look back and be very, very grateful for. And I can't wait for that thank you to make that decision. That is my job to do now.
Yeah, I think this circles back to the thing we said about evidence-based parenting, because if you're being a leader in the child-parent dynamic, that carries an assumption that, like, let's just say you're running a company, you know what the end goal is of what you're navigating to. And so with some of these studies around punishment, it seems like people don't realize that the end goal is like behavior modification. And so what is the goal? Like what are you wanting your kid to get to over long term, to at 10 years old, 18 years old, and then eventually to an adult?
So this is one of my favorite starting points with parents when we talk, because I don't want to make that assumption for anyone, right? And at the same time, so often when I say to parents, tell me the 18-year-old you want. Tell me, what does that 18-year-old look like? What does your relationship with your 18-year-old look like? Tell me the 30-year-old you want. First, we just have to understand the relationship we have with our kids in their early years is extremely influential in who they are at 18 and 30, right? That I don't want to take for granted everyone knows that, right? That's not taught to a lot of us. So that's why parenting matters so much. And then when I hear from parents about the 18-year-old they want or the 30-year-old, I often do hear a lot of commonalities. First of all, I want someone who is confident. I want someone who's resilient. What does that mean? Well, life is hard. So I want someone who's able to take on and tolerate hard moments, not kind of collapse in them. What kind of relationship do you want with your kid when they don't have to have a relationship with you? That's a question I ask a lot, because after the age of 18, or whatever, 20-something, they don't have to. And a lot of parents say the same things there. I want someone who wants to come home at Thanksgiving. Like, they want to see me. I also want someone who's out in the real world and they know if they get fired from a job or have a bad breakup or in a tricky situation, they can call me. So let's just say that's the end goal. Then it begs the question, okay, so what patterns not moments. We always focus on moments. Nobody gets every moment right. But moments aren't the impact on a kid. Overall patterns are, right? So if I want my kid to come to me when they're in tricky situations, how do I want to respond when I hear they stole Bobby's truck at school because they just left his little fire truck in his cubby and put it in their backpack and said it was them? Now, I promise you, your kid is probably not going to be stealing toy fire trucks at age 30, but without a doubt, your kid is going to want something at age 30, is not going to be able to have it, and might think about pretty sneaky or not great ways of getting that. And if you want your kid to be equipped, or if your kid does make a mistake, you want them to come to you. How we respond when our kid steals Bobby's fire truck or takes money from us when we said, no, you can't take money to go to that concert, whatever it is, those moments will be stored in your kid's body. And that is going to be much more impactful in terms of what they do later than just saying to your kid at age 18, you can talk to me about anything. Their body's going to say, yeah, I beg to differ. That's not really what happened, right? How we talk about feelings when our kids are young. Is it okay to be angry? I would say it's always okay to be angry. Is it okay to hit people? It's never okay to hit people. So what are we talking about? The difference between feelings and behavior. How can I establish that with my kid? Of course you're allowed to be angry, even at people you love. You're not allowed to yell at people you love. You did yell. What could you do differently next time? Well, if I think about that similarly to basketball, if I have a player who's missing layups, I don't know any good coach who says, you've been missing layups, no dessert for a week. At the next game, make those layups. I don't know. Is that the coach you want? Like, I'd be like, okay. Maybe that feels powerful in the moment, but I don't know how this kid's going to make better layups. Well, how do I teach my kid what to do with anger? Can we practice that? Can we talk about the fact that it's hard to manage anger? And here's different ways that we can actually, do more productive things with it. So all of those patterns of interacting early on, knowing nobody's perfect, that really impacts those things we all want later on. And when it comes to punishment, again, me too. Every once in a while, of course, I just yell out, no TV for a week, no dessert, just because I think actually we don't talk enough about how parents just punish usually because they feel desperate. We just don't know what to do. And so we feel powerless. And we've been taught the best way to get your power back as a parent is just to yell out a punishment you don't even believe in that you later walk back. Can't even tell you many times. No dessert tonight. And then later, it's like, well, sorbet isn't dessert because it's fruit. So you can have sorbet and talk about losing your power. We've just totally undone our power. But punishing a kid for not having skills to manage anger will never teach a kid skills to manage anger. And when we see that there's a whole world between punishment, not very effective for learning, and permissiveness, also not very effective for learning, when we see there's a world between where I can set a boundary that wasn't okay. And when we both take a breath, we're going to talk about a different way to talk to your sister because it is okay to be angry at her, but calling her a name is not safe in our family. And sweetie, I just know you can do better. So let's both take a breath and let's practice that situation again where your sister says, you can't play with me. And we're going to actually go through the motions of doing that together because just like in basketball, when you practice layups, we can practice a different way to respond. And then yes, over time, that actually does, just like in the gym, translate into kind of different behavior in the game.
Yeah, I can't help but think of the impact of, you hear this term thrown around, I just want my kids to be happy, right? And
I hate that. I hate it.
So, there's an implicit thing there that, it's kind of at odds with managing feelings. And then I think even as adults, we feel that sort of ambivalence towards any sort of negative feelings.
Yes. First of all, this whole idea, and I think maybe in our generation, we were brought up with this idea of negative feelings and positive feelings. It's just like a categorization I want to throw out. There's no such thing. If you're the CEO of a company trying to make good decisions, any data your company brings you is just data. Negative data, no, maybe negative data is something that would make you make a different decision or feel uncomfortable. That's the best data for a CEO to get because now they're more informed to make a better decision. There's no negative feelings. There's no positive feelings. There are certainly feelings that are easier and more comfortable to feel, and there's feelings that are harder and more uncomfortable to feel. So let's just get rid of positive, negative. I just want my kid to be happy. Every time I hear this, I just have to jump in. I just ruin a good, perfectly, small talk conversation. I'm like, no, we don't. Because again, if we think about the long-term impact of parenting, which is really, I think, what we're about at Good Inside. I always say we're very long-term greedy with your kids. Optimizing for happiness in childhood leads to anxiety and fragility in adulthood. And I don't know anyone who says, I want my 18-year-old to be very anxious and very fragile. I haven't met the parent. So why? When we say, I just want my kid to be happy, we actually see uncomfortable feelings as a problem to fix. And then we fix the feeling to bring our kid to happy. Example, I wasn't invited to Tala's birthday party. Oh, you know what? Let's find the other 3 kids who weren't invited to Tala's birthday party, and we're going to have a better party on the same date, and we're going to have a bigger cake, and Saturday's going to be fun. Okay. Another example. I just want to stay up later. All my friends stay up later, and you kind of know your kid's about to have a tantrum. Okay, fine. Watch another show, even though internally you know my kid needs sleep to function, develop, focus, all the important things. What I'm really doing when I'm optimizing for happiness is I'm kind of saying to my kid, you're about to feel frustrated, or you do feel disappointed. You feel frustrated, disappointed, jealous, sad, self-doubting. I am as scared of you feeling that emotion as you are. And so I'm going to lift you out of that emotion and bring you to distraction or happiness. When it comes to wiring, which is what happens in our kids' early years, what their body learns is whenever I feel jealous, sad, disappointed, what gets wired next to that uncomfortable feeling is my parents' fear. So now the next time I feel those feelings, it's going to be even more unmanageable. And I will learn that my job is to run away from those feelings because those feelings cannot be tolerated. That's what anxiety is. All anxiety is the experience of trying to run away from a distressing feeling in your body. And so if a kid learns in their early years, the range of emotions that I can tolerate is very narrow. It's basically happy, mad, jealous, less than, disappointed. That is not tolerable. I need to run away. I've truly set my kid up for an adulthood where anytime they feel anything but happy and satisfied and comfortable, they will have alarm bells going off in their body telling them it's an emergency and it's dangerous, which is what anxiety and fragility looks like.
So if a parent is confused on, if you go back to the punishment thing, on the difference between a behavior and emotion, because you might think that punishing your kid when they're having an outburst teaches them self-control over their own emotions.
Right. So it's a great push or double click. When kids get punished over and over for certain behaviors, they're smart. They don't just learn the behavior was bad. They know, well, this behavior came out of feeling angry. And so I don't have any skills to manage anger. No one's teaching me those. So I guess the way I can protect myself from getting punished again is just to not feel angry. And so when they feel angry, their body learns, no, wrong. Now, the irony is you can't get rid of your feelings. So the more a kid believes that their feelings are wrong, the more those feelings will come out in bad behavior. It is completely counterproductive. The same is true for adults. The more we feel like we're not supposed to feel angry at our partner for something, guess what? We push it down. Then, I don't know, something relatively small happens. It's the last straw and we find ourselves raging. And they're like, whoa, you're overreacting. And then we're apologizing. But actually, we probably had all these low levels of anger that were information for us to speak up. We didn't. And so it comes out in a completely uncontrolled way. So maybe we could walk through, like, let's say my kid says, I hate you, right? I hate you. You're the worst mom ever. Okay. Or they hit their sibling. Either way. I get parent skepticism. Okay, so I'm not punishing my kid. Well, what am I doing? Again, I'm just going to use basketball again because it makes it so concrete. Think about your kid missing every shot, and you think, my kid knows how to make a shot. What would you do with your kid if you were the coach? My guess is a good coach would maybe take the kid out of the game, not out of punishment, but just because, hey, this is like not your day. We're going to take you out. Hey, I'm pulling you out. It's not your day. All good. And then I think a good coach would say, let's meet in the gym early tomorrow. We're going to look at your shooting form. Something's off. We're going to practice something different. And I mean, you tell me, do you think people would say, oh, such a permissive coach, basically letting the kid know that if you play bad in a game, you get extra help. You're reinforcing missing shots. I mean, do you think anyone...
No.
So if you think about it the same way, let's say my kid hit their sibling, okay? Now again, the alternative to punishment is never saying, oh, your anger is so beautiful, let it out. No, we think in extremes, so that is definitely not something I recommend. First thing to do if your kid, let's say, is hitting, and this goes back to a parent's job, is set a boundary. Most parents don't set boundaries. We just vomit our frustration because we're not setting boundaries. What is a boundary? I'm not going to let you hit your sister. And then I would literally walk over to my kid and either block the hit, stand between them, maybe pick my kid up, carry them away, might look at my other kid and say, ouch, that hurts. Hitting isn't okay. I'll be with you in a moment. But I would set a boundary. I would set a limit. And then I know my urge would be to say, no dessert tonight, or you're such a bad kid. Shame doesn't teach skills. Shame gets in the way of learning skills. And I promise you, for centuries, we've tried shame as a learning mechanism. It just doesn't work. It doesn't work for adults or kids. So let's say now I've contained the situation. I know my kids' feelings are activated. They're not in a logical place. I'm not going to teach. I actually just have to wait, which is the hardest thing. Because in that moment, we want to punish because we want to prove to someone that we're doing something. I'm doing something. But again, the best CEOs, I know, they don't make bold decisions in the heat of an emotional moment.
Yeah.
They wait. So wait, contain the situation, make it safe, and wait. If I'm going to say anything to my kid, when my kid is activated, it might just be, you're a good kid having a hard time. That is a phrase I want every parent to try on. And I promise you, it is going to feel amazing to say, and you are going to be shocked by the way your kid needs to hear that. It's actually what we need to hear. We need someone to see our goodness as separate from our recent bad behavior. You're a good kid having a hard time. Then let's think about it and wait. Okay, what was happening? Well, there's this thing, and my daughter was holding it, and there's only one of them, and my son really wanted it. If we're honest with ourselves, even as adults, it's hard to want something and not have it. We might not hit, but most of us aren't great at that either. So that's probably what's happening under the behavior. He really wanted it. He was waiting. He was struggling, got frustrated. It came out as a hit. So here's what I would say to a parent next. Well, what would your son have to do the next time to not hit? Because the truth is, he's going to be with your daughter again and probably have to wait for the blue bowl or for the fire truck. So what would you have to do in a situation to not have your frustration explode out of your body? And a lot of parents will say, I don't know, that's why I'm talking to you, just tell me. Or they might have an idea. Either way is fine. So say, okay, well, here's one interesting thing. Most kids, when they're frustrated, they have the urge to move forward to a sibling. That's why they hit. They move into them to go grab it. What if we really worked with your son? And I promise you this work, people are like, that's so much time. It's definitely less time than it takes to manage hitting over and over. What if we took 30 seconds to almost be with your son in a room and say, let's say I have this and you want it. It's so hard to wait, right? Could you do this with me? And I would literally do this. I would literally just say, kids love sounds. What am I doing? I'm actually teaching my kid, of course you want it, but what would happen if you move your body away from someone instead of towards someone? You know what happens? You don't hit because you also have more time. Or what if maybe something else would just be saying, waiting is hard and I can do it. Waiting is hard and I can do it. Waiting is hard and I can do it. I'm literally teaching them a skill to use in that moment. And I know this sounds so different, but it only sounds so different because we've never thought about emotion regulation skills the way we thought about swimming skills, right? You know what your kids learn to do when they swim? They blow bubbles. They do little strokes. You have to scaffold them from point A to point Z. It's the same thing. And the intervention, I promise you, takes 60 seconds. Now, does that mean your kid's never going to hit again? No. But does that mean the likelihood just went down? Yes, because your kid is good inside. They don't actually want to hit. They're just overwhelmed with the feeling. And when you come in like a coach who's on their team to keep them safe and teach them a skill they were missing in the first place, they tend to be pretty receptive to it.
I'd imagine it could be somewhat, you're setting a physical boundary there where you're getting in between the kids and then you're moving the kid from situation. But I'd imagine, especially as you get older, 3, 5, 7, 10, the verbal assault on you and setting a boundary there, because, what if the kid's saying oh, F you, like stuff like that. What does it look like to set a boundary with their words? So
let's just talk about what a boundary is first, because they're definitely different with verbal kind of aggression, and I would have a slightly different intervention. A boundary is something you tell someone you will do, and it requires the other person to do nothing. I love this definition of a boundary because most of us say all the time, my kid doesn't respect my boundaries. All that tells me is you have an inaccurate definition of a boundary, because a boundary is something you tell your kid you will do. And the success of your boundary, no matter whether it's a kid or adult, should require the other person to do nothing. I won't let you hit. I'm picking you up and carrying you away from your sister. My kid's not going to like it. They're going to protest. But the success of that boundary is not dependent on my 4-year-old's cooperation, which is a good thing, okay? Verbal stuff is different, right? Because saying, I won't let you talk to me that way, well, they still
Talk
could.
to you, yeah.
Right. So for anything that's going on with our kids, I like to differentiate. There's stuff we can do in the moment, and there's stuff we do out of the moment. Again, it's just like sports. Like, sure, you can coach a kid in the game, but if something isn't going well, we all know you're probably going to have more success thinking, what can I do when things are calm, in practice, and let's practice that there, right? So that's exactly how we have to think about parenting. If kids are really verbally aggressive to you, there's definitely some things we can do in the moment, but the majority of what's going to be ineffective is going to be what you do outside the moment, just like in a marriage. If I'm seeing a couples and couples therapy, and every time they get upset, someone's like, F you, and you're the worst partner. And someone's like, well, what should I do in the moment they say that? Like, I don't know, got to kind of survive the moment. But any good couples therapist is going to say, well, what's leading to that moment? Like, what's going on before, right? And so I think it's the exact same thing. What can you do in the moment? If kids saying, I hate you, you're the worst parent, the first thing you should do in the moment is my current favorite parenting strategy. And I call it doing nothing, okay? And the reason I call it doing nothing as opposed to saying just do nothing is people say that to me all the time. I see my partner, they're trying this whole good inside thing, and my 12-year-old daughter said, you're the worst mom in the world, and she just did nothing, as if it's like a downgraded strategy. Doing nothing on the outside means you're doing something on the inside. You are regulating your own emotions. Ironically, saying back to your 12-year-old daughter, well, sometimes I hate you too, and no one else is going to ever want to be around you. You look like you're doing something, and I'm sorry, but it has to be said, you are doing nothing on the inside, and you are essentially acting just like a child. So this whole doing nothing, I like to call a strategy with like a capital D and a capital N, because it gives parents permission to say, I'm choosing to do this, and I'm actually working really hard to do this. And why would I do nothing in that moment? For a couple of reasons. The only reason my kid is saying this thing in an escalated way is because they have something that they're really struggling with. They're not being believed in a certain way. I don't know, even maybe they had a bad day at school and they just took it out on us. Me adding fuel to the fire, it's just a totally ineffective strategy. Again, I could be right. Sure, I can respond to those words, but it's going to be ineffective. If you want to be effective, the first thing to do in that moment is nothing. The other thing doing nothing does, and this is really visual, and I think it's really powerful to think about, just put yourself in your kid's position. And maybe you're talking to a boss or a friend or a partner. Same, had a bad day, something escalated, and you say to your partner, I hate you. Or for me, it'd be like, you're the worst husband in the world. Okay. And I want you to imagine me with my husband on the other side, just doing nothing. What ends up happening is I kind of picture the I hate you or I do nothing. It like flies out of my mouth. If my husband says back to me, well, you're the worst wife in the world, okay? He just kind of hits the ball back to me. And now you know what's going to happen. Hit it back to him. And we're kind of, I call it like playing rudeness tennis, where I promise you nobody ever wins. If he says nothing, this thing I say just kind of like lives between us. And ironically, now I can see it because he doesn't respond. I can't even tell you how effective this is with kids. There have been so many times, and it's not just with my kids, I've heard this from parents. They said, okay, Dr. Becky, I'm going to try our whole doing nothing strategy. I'm just going to take a deep breath, remind myself I have time. And I said, the craziest thing happened. My kid yelled, I hate you. You're the worst. I took a deep breath. It was so different for them. And I waited. And before too much time passed, they said, oh, that's not what I meant. Or, oh, I'm just really upset. Because instead of responding to it right away, you're just letting it live. You're almost letting your kid off the hook for seeing what they just said when you just kind of vomit your own frustration right back at them.
The thing I'm confused about is like, so one of the most common things I've had, particularly from men, older men, right, is let's just say the kid flies off the handle to the mother. And then the dad comes in very sternly, grabs the kid and being like, you will never say that ever again. Almost like a physical imposition of trying to teach the kid to respect his mother.
Totally.
And so you might even hear someone say when they're 25 that like they remember their dad doing that, and so they learned never to say that ever. What would you say about that? Is that a myth? Is that?
Well, I think we're talking about some nuance here. First of all, in no way do I think a parent should be a punching bag for a kid.
Yeah.
There's a lot of flavors of this. An 8-year-old saying I hate you when they're upset, like I'm just not terribly impressed by that. They say that, we get through it, we teach them how to respond differently, and often, not always, but often, yelling back at your kid in that situation only makes the situation worse. Parents rarely come to me saying, my kid yells, I hate you, I yell back, and everything's gotten better. If that's what happens, then they're probably not talking about the issue. Now, there's other situations where, of course, and this is why checking in and knowing yourself matters. Yeah. It's important to say you don't need someone in to swoop in. You could say, look, you're really upset. Honestly, I'm not going to stay in your room while you're yelling at me like this. It's not just for me. It's not good for you to watch yourself yell at me in this way. I'm going to step out. You're a good kid. Something is happening. This is not a productive way of talking about it. And I'm going to step out of the room. We'll both take a little time. We'll figure it out later. Yes, 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 every time if that feels right to you. But there are some moments where parents say, that's not really what happened. They just had an intense reaction to me saying that, I don't know, I forgot to get vanilla ice cream at the store. And actually just waiting a moment doesn't feel like I'm a punching bag. It just gives us a little bit more time and space. And so I think you can have both options in kind of your back pocket.
Does it matter like how old they are? Because I imagine it's even less fun if it like a 15-year-old who's a little bit more developed is saying something very visceral. And like now you've seen this kid like kind of mature a little bit and he's saying something so piercing.
Yeah.
And I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I think my question there again, I as a general principle, I think we have to understand before we intervene, right? I mean, so what's going on here? What is the 15-year-old saying? What's the situation? What's the nature of your relationship in general with your 15-year-old? Often I hear from parents of 15-year-olds whose kids are hurling awful things at them. Yeah, no, it's not like baseline we're that connected. Like we're either in low-level conflict or high-level conflict. Sure, I guess you can yell back in high-level conflict, but your real issue isn't the high-level conflict moments. It's actually just that your relationship isn't in a good place. So we should really talk about that. Sure, we have to talk about how to kind of get through this 5-alarm fire situation when your 15-year-old is being verbally abusive, but that's a symptom of the problem. That's actually not the core of the problem.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I mean, there was so much linkage between how a child might feel about you or feel about their connection to you and the way that they're behaving in the moment from reading your work.
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny because people will say to me, you have all these strategies and scripts. I mean, yeah, and we all like things to kind of try in the moment. We all need that, okay? But there's 2 strategies in any relationship: understanding and connection. Those are the only real strategies there are, okay? And when your kids are teens, connection's the only thing that really matters. It really is. So if you're not connected to your teen, which doesn't mean keeping them happy all the time, it definitely doesn't mean saying yes all the time, and it doesn't mean being perfect, but if you're not connected to your teen, every single transition and moment of a curfew or homework or their phone, everything is going to be a battlefield. And then too often we're trying to solve each part of the battlefield with force. All that does is probably make a teen feel more disconnected and alone, which ironically is the fuel on their end to come looking at you like an enemy the whole time. And so, yes, we have to do some damage control, but to me, the power of change is knowing what is the core issue here. And it's probably not the argument about the curfew. The core issue is probably your kid feeling understood and seen by you, this balance between validating what's happening to them, still setting boundaries because you're the authority, staying connected when you disagree about things. When you can start getting to that core, instead of saying, what should I do when my kid curses me out, your kid's just going to be less likely to curse you out.
How do you not use that as like ammunition against yourself though? Because if you really put weight on the fact that the way your child feels connected to you is very paramount, then you could easily start having the thoughts again of, I'm the reason I'm messing my child up because they're not connected to me, or I'm not connecting with them in a way that they need in the moment.
Yeah, I think you're asking a question that goes far beyond parenting. And actually, I always find we get this question about parents when we don't in any other area, really, where how do I learn something without blaming myself? That's just a question about learning. How do I recognize, I'm not doing great in math? Okay, well, is that because I'm horrible and I'll never be good at math? Or can I say, okay, this is hard. How can I go get help? Okay, I'm struggling as a manager, right? And the people I manage keep quitting or something like that. I guess I can go into a hole and say, I'm a horrible manager and oh my goodness. Or I can say, okay, what's going on here? Let me figure this out. Can I get education? Can I get support? Because to me, and I say this to parents all the time, when our kids are really acting out, I never think it's a parent's fault. It's not a parent's fault. And when you're in fault mode, you blame yourself. I do think it's a parent's responsibility to be the agent of change. Again, because I say that from a place of deeply believing in a parent, because I would always put my money on a parent rather than a 15-year-old even. I would. And so I think that's the difference, is when something's hard in my life, can I shift out of fault because it's just not productive? But can I recognize something's not going the way I want it to and shift into responsibility, learning, and empowerment?
So you've mentioned this, you've alluded to this, but the job of a parent, the role of a parent, can you articulate that deeper?
Yeah, definitely. So again, I think every parent, we all want to do a good job. I think it's the thing we care about the most, right? Even if we don't realize it day to day. But with any job, you truly can't do a job well if you don't know what your job is. And I do hope this is relieving to a parent if they're thinking, I haven't been feeling great. Oh, well, if I don't know what my job description is, at least I know that's the starting point. I have to know that, or else I'm just throwing things at the wall. A parent, to me, always has two jobs. It's boundaries and validation. And to be clear, they're both forms of connection. It's not like boundaries lower connection and validation of your kid increases connection. No, they both are forms of connection because kids need both things to feel safe. So boundaries are decisions we make and limits we set from a place of embodying our authority. Now, I think that sounds almost like an uncomfortable phrase, but I think, Good Inside really is this model of authority without aggression, which unfortunately there just haven't been a lot of models of in the world. But authority is a good thing. We're not on equal playing field with our kids. That doesn't mean we don't respect our kids or want to connect with them. We do. But kids should not make decisions when they're 5 about their bedtime or how much screen time they get or how many activities they do after school. It's not to say we don't hear them and validate them. Oh, you wish you could stay up later. But those decisions are in our side of the court. Just like a passenger might say, I don't want to make an emergency landing. But if you hear a pilot say, okay, then we won't. I mean, nothing's more terrifying than that. So we have to set boundaries, limits, decisions to keep our kids safe. And the other part of our job, which actually tends to go hand in hand with boundaries, is validating our kids' emotions. And this is important because it's also misunderstood. Validating a kid's emotions doesn't mean you have the same emotions. It doesn't mean you would have the same emotions if you were them. And it definitely doesn't mean you approve of any behaviors that come from those emotions, okay? Validating is simply the process of believing someone else's emotions are real for them. It's really just, I believe you. And the reason I say these work together is because when we set a boundary, a true boundary, kids generally get upset about it. Because when we set a boundary, we're stopping a kid from getting what they want in the short term because we have a long-term goal in mind or because we see something unsafe. A kid generally will protest tantrum, scream, cry, which ironically allows us to kick in the other part of our job, validating their emotions. So here's a good example. My kid's jumping on the couch. And let's say in my house, I wouldn't really care, but let's say they're jumping near a glass table. And I know this is dangerous. Too often, we think we're setting a boundary when we're not. Get off the table, Charlie. Get off the couch, Charlie. Charlie, get off the couch. Am I telling my kid what I'm going to do? No. Does that require my kid to do nothing? No. I'm making a request. And if my request is unsuccessful, I know I have to set a boundary. So I might say, Charlie, it's not so safe to jump there. I'm going to walk over to you. And if by the time I get there, you're not off the couch, I'll pick you up and put you on the floor. Okay. I walk over to Charlie. Again, Charlie's not going to look at me and say, slow clap. No, because Charlie wants to jump on the couch, and because Charlie's however old, he doesn't realize it's dangerous. He's just lost in fun because, again, his prefrontal cortex hasn't kicked in, doesn't understand. I could fall off. I could crack my head. Not fun stuff. That's just not what's going to happen. So I walk over, and now I'm going to actually do what I say. Charlie, I'm going to pick you up and put you on the floor. What is my kid going to do? You're the worst. I hate you. Especially if they're not used to a boundary and they're young. They're going to protest. Too often, parents think a kid's protest is a sign they're doing a bad job. Almost always, a kid's protest is a sign, as a parent, that you're setting a boundary, which ironically means you're probably doing a good job in the moment. And now my kid protests, and if I like to be a good student and do all the parts of my job well on the same day, I actually look forward to this opportunity, because then I can say to Charlie, oh, you really wanted to jump on the couch. Oh, it stinks to be a kid and not be able to do exactly what you want to do. And when a parent often hears me say that, they say, oh, so you just let him jump? No, we are completely confusing validation with my decision making. I can validate that my kid is upset and make sure my kid doesn't run back to the couch, which I will. No, I'm not going to let you run back. My number one job is to keep you safe. And this is actually so important because it's maybe not something we literally say, but I think it's what guides the good inside philosophy. My number one job is to keep you safe, and I actually love you so much that I'm willing to make decisions that I think are good for you, even if you're upset with me. That to me is what a sturdy leader does. They have clarity in their role. They know they have to embody their authority. They know they have more information than the other people, like their children. And so they're willing to make decisions, even decisions that their kids are upset about in the moment, out of a place of love and care.
Yeah, it's so interesting, the validation of emotions piece, because if you look at a lot of the scripts that you go through with conflict resolution with couples, one of the biggest components is the sort of embodied listening, where they will tell you how they feel, and then you have to like repeat back to them how they feel. And then it's like, did I get it right? And it's like, no, you didn't get it right. Like, this is how I feel. And so when you then equate that with a child in the moment, like, they're not an adult, so they don't have the regulation, but you're still kind of using that same technique of the validation, but paired with the boundary, the validation of like, oh, you want this right now. And it makes, I guess that makes them feel seen.
Well, I really think, and this is why I love working with parents of young kids. I work with adults, in therapy and couples therapy, because it's all the same principles. Whether you're 2 or 62, you're just looking to be believed. That is what humans want at any age. We want to feel believed, because when we feel believed, we feel real, truly. And when you don't feel real, you will protest and escalate in an intense way, because you're actually just saying to the other person, will you please see me as a real person feeling real things? And as soon as you do, whatever I'm yelling about probably won't even be important to me anymore, because all of that is just a medium for you to connect to me. So when I say to my kid, oh, you really want to watch another show, you really wish you could have a sleepover even on a Wednesday, I am turning off the TV, and there's no way I'm letting my kid have a sleepover on a weeknight when they have school the next day. But I know I'm going to hold the boundary. And so validating my kid's experience doesn't feel threatening to me. It doesn't feel like not embodying my authority. It feels like I'm giving myself what I need, making the decision I know is right. And at the same time, I'm giving my kid what they need, which actually isn't getting what they want. It's just being seen as real and being believed.
What if the kid goes back in the room and turns the television back on?
Great question. So this is something I hear from parents all the time, but then they just go get their iPad. Then they just turn on the TV. And I mean this with love. Why are you setting your kid up for failure? Why are you putting the remote somewhere that they could reach? And I really mean this. Why is the iPad out within a kid's reach and sight during a period of time when your kid doesn't have the iPad? I mean, I don't know about you. Are you very successful seeing your phone in the room?
No.
Are you successful at all?
No.
And you're a lot older than the kids we're talking about. Me too. And I'm guessing, getting to know you, I think you have like pretty decent, if not above average, self-control for an adult and self-awareness. So this happens all the time. My kid pushes kids off the swings at playgrounds. They just keep doing it. I mean this with love. Why are you letting your kid near the swing without you being there?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I never hear a parent say, my kid just keeps running into oncoming traffic. Can you imagine a parent saying that? What would you say to a parent if they said that? They just keep doing it. What would you say?
Well, why is the kid there to begin there with?
Why is your kid unsupervised? They just no. You're not going to hold your kid's hand or put them in a stroller because you're angry at your kid. You're doing that to protect your kid. So many times we think our kids are acting out or trying to be bad or not listening when really as parents, we're just not setting the boundary that we need to set.
Now, does that work when they're 15? Like, because if they just like walk out of the house, like, I mean, if you're like, hey, you can't go out and do this thing at midnight at 15, and then they just jump out the window and
they're going to say,
do
thanks
it.
for your advice. And they're going to be out. Yes. So there's a lot of things here. I hear this from parents all the time. My kids need to learn self-control. Okay. It's kind of like saying my kids need to learn how to swim in the ocean, so I'm just going to throw them into the ocean. I don't know any parent who worries that starting in the training pool means you're not preparing your kid for the real world. Have you ever heard that?
No.
We have to let's just get the tidal waves going because that's what's going to happen one day. So that's how your kid's going to learn. That's totally absurd. That's not how learning or skill development works. What happens when you set a boundary for your kid? For example, I'm not even going to let you see the remote control during non-TV time. Your kid in their body wants to watch TV, right? So they're going to have that urge in their body. And it's going to be paired with not having that urge met. I want to watch TV. I can't get the remote. I want to have a sleepover. I'm not allowed, right? That pairing in their body of their urge with kind of your boundary, or they're experiencing that they're not able to convert the urge into a behavior, that's actually the pairing you want. You want your kid to be in a situation where they want to watch TV and can't find the remote. Because what that actually teaches them in their body is, oh, I guess I am able to wait. That's actually going to be the thing when they're 15 that enables them to be around a remote and not take the remote, because they've experienced not literally seeing the remote and not taking it, but they've experienced waiting and frustration tolerance because there were enough boundaries for them to learn that.
What does a parent need to know if they feel like they're behind the 8 ball, right? So their kid is 7, their kid is 12 now. They haven't been practicing these sorts of things for 7 years, and now they're having to. So
first of all, I really mean this. I would say you're not behind the 8 ball. Like something that's helped me at every point in my life when I've had that feeling is a mantra, which is just the right time to change is always right now.
Yeah.
It's literally always true. And what I'd say to that parent is, oh my goodness, look how ahead of things you are compared to tomorrow and next week and next year. Like that, I just think I would switch that framework. Okay. Number 2, after that is amazing. Let's figure out what's not feeling good in your home and let's scaffold some changes. If a parent says to me, I don't care that my kid can get the remote, I would say to them, okay, no, like, I mean this, I don't care then. Like it's you're in the house. Like if you don't think something's a problem as a parent, I would never tell you except for certain things. There's no hitting kids. There's no violence, right? We don't want, anyway. But if you're saying, I don't mind, I think it's fine the amount of TV that my kid watches, or it actually works for our family because of these circumstances, that's fine. But most parents will say to me, okay, I listened to this podcast. You know, it's interesting. Maybe I'm not setting the boundaries. And the truth is, if I start putting the iPad away, my kid's going to freak out. And so what do I do about that? I do want to go back to the pilot, okay? Because to me, this is something we can always channel, and it gives us the feeling state we need to make decisions. Pilots do have a flight path. They do. They're like, I'm going to fly from New York to Los Angeles. And if there is a change of weather or a light that goes on, and let's say they have to make an emergency landing or a detour, nobody would ever say to the pilot, but you promised, but you're changing your mind. No. Your job as a pilot is to always make the best decisions you can with the information you have. And if information changes, you're changing your decision isn't breaking promises. It's actually doing the exact job you promised to do. I think it's so important parents know this, because parents will tell me, well, my kid is already, I don't know, they have a phone and they don't have time limits for Snapchat. So it just is what it is. Can you imagine a pilot saying that? Flying to LA, it is what it is, guys. Sorry, have some lights going. It is what it is. I promise you I'd get there. It's so terrifying. And I think kids actually are terrified by the way parents cling to that idea, as opposed to saying to a kid, as an example with the phone, then we could do a smaller example after. Look, I want to tell you something. I've been thinking a lot about X thing, about the amount of time you're on Snapchat, about the way we have the iPad just in the living room. My number one job as a parent is to make the best decisions I can with the information I have, all in the name of kind of keeping you safe and helping you long term. And I've thought about something in a different way, which means something's about to change. And before I tell you what it is, let me just preview. You're not going to love it. You're not going to love it. You're going to yell. You might protest for a while. You might whine. And in the past, that's kind of led me to change my decision. But this is going to be different. You're totally allowed to be upset. And I'm totally allowed to make this new decision. So here it is. I'm changing parental controls on Snapchat. I'm changing the amount of time. And it's not a punishment. It's actually protection, even if it doesn't feel like that. I have a feeling you're going to be really mad at me for a week or two. You're going to be lower level mad, but still pissed off for a little bit after. And I also know our relationship is strong enough to get through it. And so that change is going to start tomorrow. The iPad's no longer going to be out. You know why it's no longer going to be out all the time? I keep yelling at you for taking the iPad. It's really not fair. The truth is, it's really hard for anyone to see a device at any age and not take it. And so the iPad will now be somewhere that I will not tell you where it is, and you will not be able to reach it. And for the next couple of days, it's going to feel really weird because you're going to want to check it or do those things. It's just not going to happen. And you're going to be upset and you're going to protest. But sweetie, I love you so much that I'm willing to make decisions that I think are good for you, even if you're upset. And so we are going to get through this together.
Now, the protest behavior, I think, is interesting because obviously it feels like everybody has heard the idea that when you have a baby, right, if you're letting them just like cry it out early on, that's probably, I guess not, I mean, you'll win this, but that's not the correct approach. But as somebody gets older and they're 3, 7, 10, is there harmful effect to letting them just scream and protest?
I love what you're saying. And to me, we're mixing up two things. There's your kids having intense emotions and kind of sending them away or just like not acknowledging them. And then there's kids having intense, distressing emotions and you being present for them. We actually don't want to avoid the latter. We want the latter. I would tell a parent that is a win. When your kid says, oh, but I want my iPad. You know, I don't recommend going silent like that. You don't have to talk to your kid as a lecture either. But when you say to your kid, I know, you're right, this is a big change. And changes take time to get used to. Oh, you really wish the iPad was here like it was yesterday. I get it. It's different. Of course that feels bad.
So that's like the holding of a baby when that's like 6 months or something.
Actually what you're providing for your kid is a container. You're kind of like this container. And if you're able to contain or tolerate your kids' emotions, that is the only way they learn to tolerate their own emotions. So, and we could say this for other ways too. Oh, I didn't make the soccer team. Your kid's going to be really upset. I don't recommend, obviously you're not going to say, oh, only losers cry. No, you don't have to say that. And you also don't have to say, let's take tomorrow off school because this is an awful tragedy and we need to process it for 36 hours. There's so many things between two extremes. What's between it? First of all, probably the most important thing for a parent to say is just, I'm so glad you told me. That stinks. Like those two sentences, and then I always say to myself when I say that, count to 30 slowly. I don't say that to my kid because I'll be like, that's a weird thing to say. Count to 30. And I do. It feels like it takes 2 hours. And it's not to say then, and then after my kid looks at me and they're like, you know what? This is going to make me more resilient. No, obviously they've never said that. But again, if we're just looking to be believed, and if our feelings aren't really what give us problems, but feeling alone in our feelings is what gives us problems. Letting your kid know you're someone they can come to. Simple validation. That stinks. And then shutting up is often an amazing combination.
What's interesting about the role as a parent is like sometimes what you need in the moment might be at odds with what your child needs in the moment. So the quote unquote, I don't know what I want to say bad, but like unproductive parenting response in the moment might be like you had a horrible day at work, your mental health hasn't been good, and like you literally just need the kid to shut up in the moment. And what is the dance there of that?
So that's exactly right. And I actually think that is so often the inconvenience of parenting. That's often the power struggle of parenting. So let's say I've had a bad day at work, right? I've come home and this is the night my kid is saying, why did you have chicken for dinner? I hate chicken. Meanwhile, until that day, it's the only protein they've like ever eaten for the last 9 years, right? But just one of those days they're saying that. And you're thinking like, all I wanted when I came home was to like sit on the couch, play some music, I don't know, whatever it is that feels relaxing to me. And for most people, whining about chicken is like not in the category of things that I find relaxing. So it's just a mismatch. And I think it's so important to just name that without blame. We have such a hard time in our culture talking about hard things without blame. Like maybe my kid is having a hard time, and honestly, I'm just having a hard time after work. And the fact that those things are happening at the same moment is just like unfortunate. Doesn't mean I have a bad kid. It doesn't mean I have a bad parent. It's just a moment where what I need, peace and quiet on the couch, is different than what my kid needs, which is probably me to be there calmly, because probably the thing about chicken actually comes from the fact that they were left out and picked last at basketball recess and held it together all day and was just kind of looking for me to come home so I could express something and we could end up getting into a conversation. Like that's generally probably what's happened. And I just don't really have the capacity to do that. So a couple things. Knowing what's going on for yourself as a parent is the most important parenting superpower. Because if you know you had a stressful day at work, like to me, I live in Manhattan, I might take an extra long subway ride, truly. Like sometimes I've done that. I go a couple stations too far. I come kind of back because I just know I need a little bit more time to regulate myself. Or I might sit in the lobby. Or I might, if I didn't live in the city, sit in my car. And I might say, that thing that I just want, which is to veg out on the couch, I'm not going to do that. But the truth is, probably could play a song on Spotify in my car for 3 minutes and actually put my phone down and stop doom scrolling so I can regulate myself. And instead of being at a 9.5 out of 10 agitation, maybe I'm at a 7 out of 10 when I go into my house, which is very different than a 9.5. So I think that all comes from being aware of your emotional state. And now we're circling back, having coping skills for your own emotions, which is why, again, it's like the ultimate superpower to teach that to your kid early on so they can have that when they're a parent, right? And so I think this is a dance. And then when that doesn't happen, ideally, we repair. Hey, I yelled at my kids the other day, and seriously, my son, my youngest, said, "Mom, did you have a stressful day at work?" Literally what he said.
How old is he?
He's 8.
Yeah.
But like, I did have a stressful day at work. And when you feel like too senior, like, oh my goodness. But I think actually what made me feel amazing about that is he kind of has learned, like, if you're snapping about something kind of insignificant, like this probably has more to do with you than it is a direct reflection of like my worth as an 8-year-old,
Do you think parents have an imperative to always put their kids' needs above their own?
No. Is that something people say? No, I think that's one of the worst narratives, right?
I mean, that's like literally, I've heard this like a million times.
No, first of all, anything that's like an always or a never, I generally have the heebie-jeebies about. Like I'm against rigidity, more than I'm against almost anything else. I think that's one of the worst narratives for parents because to me, I love pilot metaphors, but it really always drives it home. Imagine a pilot saying, I love flying planes. I love flying planes. I'm always thinking about my passengers. This is the 30th day in a row I've flown a plane. I haven't even really slept. I just love piloting and all of you so much. I was actually saying that once to a parent, and they said to me, there's laws for pilots, right? We know this. I'm sure you've been in a flight at some point. And you're like, the pilot's timed out, and now you have to get new pilots. There are laws, legalities that tell pilots your job of protecting people is so important that we don't suggest self-care and rest. We mandate it. Also, anytime I've been in a plane, a pilot is always on the plane before. Have you ever boarded the flight with the plane? No. They get set up in their cockpit situation. They do their checks. They probably have a routine. It's so powerful for parents to think about that. And that's the pilot you want. So what does that mean for parents? Parents, please do not always put your kids' needs above your own. Again, there's a lot between always and never. I'm not trying to say, please go to Paris for like a 3-year vacation and your kids will fend for themselves. I also don't recommend that. But there's a lot in between. Kids do not need selfless martyrs. Kids need sturdy leaders. And a principle of being a sturdy leader is that you're able to take care of yourself and that you're actually able to model your kid. A healthy relationship is one in which you care about the other person and you take care of that person's needs, and you care about yourself enough to take care of your own needs. That is what a healthy relationship is. And that, to me, should be the new ideal in parenthood.
What do you see happen to parents when they consistently suppress their own needs for their kids?
Rage. Why do we lose it at our kid at 5:30 when they protest bath? First of all, I'll validate, it's annoying. Nobody likes anyone to protest something in the routine that has to get done. But often, the parents I work with, that's just the straw that kind of breaks the camel's back. When I really do an inventory, like taking care of yourself, moving, seeing friends without your kids, talking to a friend on the phone. This is a good one. Sitting down, sitting down, drinking your coffee when it's hot, any of those things. A parent will look at me and say, I can't even remember the last time eating a meal. And I think one way of thinking about this, and this is one of my favorite topics that I love to do deeper programs on, because I think it's one of the areas where there's an intersection of parenting and actually reparenting, because that's really what this is about. That's my favorite intersection. Think about if you had never eaten a meal in a week, okay? Think about the length your body would go to remind you that you're hungry. First days would be like some signs. Day 5, it would probably be so loud. I wouldn't know. I've never not eaten for 5 days, okay? That is what happens when we end up yelling at our kids. I swear, there's lower levels of kind of information that we've learned to ignore. It would be nice to take a walk with a friend. No. I just am supposed to go out and see someone, but my kid's upset, so I cancel. And I'm kind of sad. Push the sadness away. And then I swear, there's this part of us. That's our non-caregiving part. That remembered a time when we used to take care of ourselves. To be clear, our caregiving part is still very important. But that non-caregiver part is like trying to talk to us. Take a walk. Sit down on the couch. You don't need a perfect home. You can say no. You don't have to go to that extra school event and that meeting. You can say, and we don't listen. And then one day our kid whines about chicken. And it's not even it's like that part of us just explodes and is kind of saying like, I'm starving and I have to get really, really, really loud to get your attention. But you know what we tend to say to ourselves after? I'm a monster. I'm the worst parent. That shame cycle just makes us yell more, and it gets in our way of wondering what's really going on for me. Like, of course that yelling wasn't okay and I have to work on that, but what's causing it? Am I taking care of myself? Have I eaten a meal? Have I, especially new moms, have I showered? Have I sat down? Have I asked for help? Not hinted and hoped, but actually asked a partner or a friend or someone in the neighborhood. Like, and to me, when we can help parents like understand that and speak up earlier, that's when parenting definitely doesn't become easy, but it no longer feels completely impossible.
What does it teach the kid if they see you put their needs above your own?
A couple things. Yeah. First of all, it teaches them relationships are one. And what it teaches them is love means one person completely sacrificing themselves for the other. I don't think you want your kid to go into adulthood looking for that type of relationship. And especially nowadays, it does something really scary, I think, to a kid. Is it creates these like very entitled monsters, because the kids learn the world is about my pleasure. Nobody ever says no. Nobody ever says, and maybe we have a little rant about birthday parties for a moment, right? It's like I go to 13 toddler birthday parties on the weekend because that one and candy. And my parent never says, you know what? I want 3 hours on a weekend when we're home and chill. And I'm not, driving one place to the next and running myself into the ground. And so what a kid actually learns is they don't learn this is amazing. They learn I'm supposed to get everything I want. The weekend is fully for my pleasure. I should always be optimizing my enjoyment, which ironically only leads to more tantrums and more bad behavior. And the whole cycle is just completely unproductive for everyone. So it's not good for kids. Kids need boundaries. And one form of a boundary is a parent at certain moments prioritizing their own needs.
What do you think of the kind of thought or mentality that in a household or a family, let's just say, assuming the parents are still together, that the parents' relationship to your spouse comes first, and communicating that to the kid? What do you think of that type of mentality?
So there's so many relationships within a family, right? There's, first of all, the one that's talked about the least, my relationship with myself. How do I think about my own feelings, my own needs, how I talk to myself, my relationship with my kids, their relationships with each other, my relationship with my partner, all the different dynamics. Your relationship with your partner, again, if you're partnered up and you have someone that you want to be with, is the foundation of your family's stability. So often there's this phrase, divide and conquer, when you have more than 2 kids, right? Because again, I'm going to Stella's 13 birthday parties and my partner's going to our other kids, lacrosse game, art class, violin recital, and we're ending on Sunday night, realizing like we really haven't seen each other the whole time. And we've, been kind of optimizing for our kids, both, I think, to the detriment of our kid learning everything isn't about them, but also really to the detriment of your partnership. Divide and conquer. I don't think any partnership was ever strengthened from that, right? So I think there's nuance here. And again, we don't have to be all or nothing. I think what you're getting at is the importance of at least sometimes saying to your kids, you're making a decision based on what's best for your partnership, not what's best for them individually. And I actually think that benefits the whole family. So I have 2 examples. I remember one time I was going out to my husband, my kids were younger, and one of my kids said, can we go out to dinner with you? Like, can't we just go? We'll just be really, really quiet at the table, and why not? And don't you want us to be with you? And it's interesting because I think this concept of maintaining your partnership, even when you have kids, has been something on my mind. Probably as a therapist, I've seen that go wrong for so many families. And this is what I ended up saying to my kid. I said, listen, I love being your mom. I love the time I'm with you. I love the time your dad and you are together. I love our family time. And I love the time me and your dad are together alone. And just like owning that. I love that time. I think I ended up adding, just for what it's worth, we were married before you guys were here. Mm-hmm. Just saying. Okay. And actually making sure we have time that it's just the 2 of us is very important. Mm-hmm. And we're going to keep doing it here and there. And it's okay if you're upset. We always come back and I'll see you in the morning and I'll be with you all day tomorrow and put you down, whatever it was. I think so many times we do this weird thing in that situation. Don't you want me and daddy to be happy? Again, it's like a pilot saying don't you want me to make no, I'm not going to put on my young child permission for me to prioritize my marriage. It's like a complete role reversal. And what I found is when I had sturdiness in knowing at certain moments I'm going to prioritize my marriage, and I presented that to my kid, that allowed my kid to see that as actually a really important part of the family. So that's one thing. Another thing I think they didn't directly ask about, but I think has to be said, is this idea of optimizing for your family rather than individual kids. So there's this Friday night football program that a lot of my friends' kids do. It's super fun, to be clear. It's like under the lights and like really cool, but it's on a Friday night. And for me on a Friday, all I want to do, and my husband and I luckily are aligned, is we kind of both just want to be home. We want to cook dinner, whichever our kids are there. Maybe they have a friend. We just want to chill. Yeah. And so what ended up happening, we learned this the hard way, all lessons, is we're okay, we'll do this Friday night thing. And one of us would go. And by the time we got there and come back, the other one was there. We just didn't have a Friday night. We don't do that Friday night program anymore. And to be clear, my youngest, who isn't doing it, doesn't say to us, I understand, that makes sense. That's not his first reaction. But what it means as a family to have that time carved out and not be running around, I can't even tell you the way that hits my heart. I just know it's so aligned with our values that even if we kind of could do it, doesn't mean we should do it. And so, yes, I think none of this has to be rigid. It's always about the family. It's always about the kid. It's always about your partnership. But I think you have to check in with yourself and knowing what matters. And then, am I aligning some of my decisions with those values?
Is there a level to which when you have kids, I remember seeing a Gottman study that was done a while ago, something like 67% of the participants who reported like a drop in marital satisfaction after having kids. Like, is there an expectation that you should have that like this is going to change the dynamic of your relationship, and maybe a readjustment before that satisfaction goes up on? Is that like an automatic thing that?
Yeah, I mean, when you're partnered without kids, like there's literally two people in a relationship, right? So what can get in the way of connecting? Different things, logistics, work, stress, your triggers, your past patterns. That's all true. Once you have a kid, you're in a triangle. Like the love, the connection, there's other things in the room, right? And so when you get home from work and maybe your partner does too, and maybe sometimes you have to figure out what you each want to do, but the number of people, the dynamics, the communication, how likely someone is to feel abandoned or not kind of seen, it's just so much lower. And you don't realize it because it seems silly. But yeah, when you're alone on the couch because your partner is trying to put the baby down, or your partner is, sitting with your kid having a tantrum, like logically, you're not thinking, I feel abandoned. But if your body's accustomed to being on the couch and having your partner there and snuggling and watching TV, and now instead you're just alone on the couch. Meanwhile, your partner is probably also feeling alone. They're dealing with the tantrum and they're like, well, my partner's over there on the couch just enjoying themselves. Nobody's getting their need met. Everyone feels a little resentful. And that dynamic usually just doesn't happen in such a everyday way before you have kids. Now, does that mean I think all partnerships are destined for failure? No. But I think going in with eyes wide opened, what will this be like for us? And being like, what will that be like when you're with the baby and I'm not, or vice versa? How are you parented? What are we going to end up probably disagreeing on? What will it be like for one partner maybe to know the schedule and the other partner to be asking questions? You think that's not a big deal? Mental load and who knows what and who's involved, not just helping, but understanding is a huge thing. So I think we're living in an amazing age where we can actually get ahead of some of this stuff. And then maybe the dip or just the change won't be as surprised or as severe.
Now, if we go back to kind of the original thought that we're going into this, when it comes to putting your needs even momentarily above your child's, whether that's with your partner or by yourself, does that sometimes involve instances where you would not do the thing that you would typically coach people to do, like almost indulge the unproductive parenting behavior because that's what you need in the moment? Like maybe it's just like you want the kid to shut up, and you're like, you just want to get them to shut up because like you're going to snap and like you're right at the end of the ledge if you don't do that. Or how would you help people work through that?
Yeah, I mean, I rarely hear from parents like, I was really frustrated. I just needed some peace and quiet. So I took a deep breath and told my kid to shut up. Like that's usually not how those things happen. Like usually when we snap, it's not from a place of mindful awareness. It's something that we watch ourselves do and later think, I didn't even make that decision. It just flew out of me. Yeah. Because guess what? Even as an adult, we were kind of just like our toddler who didn't have access to our prefrontal cortex because we were flooded in our nervous system. So it's just not, I would say I'd answer a different question. I just don't generally hear from a parent, like I just made that decision. But, I think a different version of answering your question.
Well, I'm asking more about like the convenient thing to do in the moment, like to opt to do the convenient thing because you'll have like a quieter house or a less disruptive
100%.
day.
100%. Like, your kid is doing a puzzle and they're having a meltdown. Do the puzzle for me. I know, in general, not going to happen 100% of the time. If you just fix that for your kid, fine, here's how you do it. You're not really helping your kid build the skills they need to tolerate hard things. Now, are there moments that I'd say to any parent, you had a really stressful day, whatever else is happening, it's just not one of those days that you're going to take the deep breath and say you can do hard things. You're just going to probably do that puzzle for your kid. And then you're going to say, permission to have intervened that way, on to the next. I'll do it differently next time. Yeah. And the irony is, that's what I would coach a parent to do. Like, that's what I mean against rigidity. No parent every time is always optimizing for long term. There are some moments we all, not necessarily through aggression, but just want to make our lives easier. My kid's having a tantrum. Fine. Here's a lollipop. Here's a second lollipop. We're on a plane. Here's 15 lollipops. Drive yourself crazy. Yes. But if that's the predominant pattern, I'm probably going to work more against myself. But if that's something I want to do once in a while to get through a hard moment, like, nobody needs my permission to do that. I can just tell you I give myself permission to do that. And I don't think I'm not doing good inside. I think I'm just, being a human.
Yeah. I mean, if we are thinking long-term, I love that you keep reiterating that our job is to keep our kids safe, right? And so there are so many challenges, especially for like millennial parents, like that didn't exist 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 100 years ago. There's an entire online world that kids get exposed to where it almost feels like you're just completely losing control to what they're being exposed to. I mean, there's been so much that has been made since, the Anxious Generation came out about, kids' digital products. How do you help parents work through keeping kids safe when it comes to how they interact with the online world?
So the first thing I want to say is, like, we have a very, very unfair job. Like, I do feel like right now parents are in some ways being asked to do the same thing they were asked to do before cigarettes were illegal for children. Like, it is the exact same thing. Like, this is the job of a system to solve, not the job of individual parents. So I just want to start with that. And I think because I'm a pragmatist, I hate the idea of, so let the system solve it. And until then, just too bad. No, like, our kids are living with us. Things don't feel good. So with that being said, whenever John Haidt and I talk, we have a really interesting kind of way of coming together, because to me, the thing that's missing from so many conversations about keeping our kids unsafe is the critical importance of setting boundaries and tolerating your kid being upset with you as young as possible. Mm-hmm. Because if we think the first time I'm going to set a boundary and say no to my kid and let them be upset with me is when they're 15 and I tell them they can't be alone with their phone in their room, the reason they're going to have such an intense yelling reaction is not just because of that decision. Is they're kind of saying, Mom, you've literally never said no to me a day in your life. You always let me have 13 cupcakes and stay up late, and you've always been scared of me being upset with you. And so now at 15, you're going to become a different parent?
Yeah.
I don't think so. So to me, the cost of not setting boundaries with your kids has never been higher. Yes, the issue is social media, but until the system fixes that, the other real issue is our struggle to set boundaries and have our kids be upset with us. Because if you practice when your kid's young, making decisions that involve, your kid being upset. No, you're not having 13 cupcakes. It's bedtime. I'm not buying you that, even if I can afford that. All these things. We are going to fold laundry together. We're going to walk. We're not going to jump in an Uber, whatever the thing is. And it's okay if you whine, and it's okay if you're upset. Then tolerating your kid being upset with you and setting boundaries is built into the fabric of your relationship with your kid. So then by the time you get to phones and social media, your decision isn't coming out of thin air. Your decision, your kid is going to experience says, this is kind of how my parent has parented me the whole way through. This is par for the course. And I just think that is such an undervalued part of the social media discussion. Now, the other side, because I'm a realist too, is a parent might say, okay, well, I didn't really set boundaries. It's true. I've kind of optimized for my kid being happy, but now this is serious. Like, I don't want to give my kid a phone, and they are going to freak out. As soon as we remember our job isn't to keep our kid happy, but our job is to stay connected to our kid, even when they're unhappy or unhappy with us, we stop thinking, I would do this, but how do I not have my kid be upset? And we start saying something very different. I'm going to do this and figure out how to tolerate my kid being upset. And I'm going to show them I can understand them and I can understand their feelings without putting their feelings in the driver's seat. That's just a framework. We could talk about applications, but to me, That's so important for parents to know, because then instead of making random decisions here and there, you have actually kind of a framework or principles that are driving that approach.
Yeah, I mean, this example actually cuts at the heart of what I was trying to get before about the putting your needs above theirs, and then the convenience. Because I mean, if you watch a kid interact with a phone or an iPad, it's like literally a drug. It's their eyes are like transfixed, and it's like they could be screaming and screaming and screaming, but as soon as you just give them the iPad, it's like a pacifier, and like they're just like quiet and like nothing's happening. And so how much of this comes down to, like, if a kid is seeing you constantly interact with your phone, if you're going to start setting boundaries around when they can and cannot interact with devices, do you have to be thinking about how much you're interacting with devices, or how would you negotiate that?
I think you have to think about that for multiple reasons, one of which is less obvious. And so I'll start with that one. Okay. Kids thrive and they develop in the context of their attachment with us, which doesn't mean we should always be near them. And it doesn't mean they should get what they want, but they need to connect with us, which means they need a good amount of time here and there where we're present, where we give them the rarest commodity there is, our full attention. When we're on our phone a lot, the irony is it's not just modeling being on our phone that leads to them wanting to be on devices more. Our being on our phone actually leads to them having worse behavior because they are less connected to us, which is the biggest reason they engage in increased bad behavior. I mean, think about when you were growing up and you wanted one of your parents' attention. How many times did you want their attention when a device was literally between you? 0?
Yeah.
Me too. Yeah. Just because it wasn't over there. And by the way, I'm not some perfect parent, but I do think it's sobering in a helpful way if I can stop the guilt spiral. How many times does my kid want my attention? And there's literally, when you think about connection, it's very literal. There's actually something blocking. They don't even see my face. They see the back of my phone, a higher percentage than I would like. But I can do something with that information because it's not just about me modeling. My presence is the single biggest thing that helps my kid learn to regulate their emotions. Plus, the other thing that happens because we're on our phones a lot is we're just less tolerant of the inconveniences of parenting because we just kind of want to go back to our own pacifier that makes everything easier. So one of the reasons I think we see such an increase in actually child difficult behavior and acting out is, number one, our kids are overstimulated in the world. Number two, we're on our phones more, which means we're more disconnected from our kids. And because we're on our phones more, we are even less tolerant of our kids' kind of difficult behavior than we were generations ago because we have this kind of ball of comfort and convenience by our side as an alternative.
How would you coach parents through, you said the thing about like not making absolute statements, but if parents are going to make a decision on what foods their kids are going to eat, how often they use their phones, how would you coach them on reviewing the data or literature on what would be most healthy or most safe for a kid long term versus, some of it's like, well, you shouldn't give the kid the phone at all until a specific age, and kind of trying to parse through, like, is this true? Is this not true? What should I do?
So I do take a pretty long-term view. I think that's how we make good decisions. So I think, first of all, just do some education, right? Do some reading, ideally before, like way before your kid is at those ages, because that's the time when we can actually empower ourselves as opposed to reading from a place of kind of panic and anxiety. That's step one. Step two, I would ask yourself, like, what are the values our family really cares about? For example, is time together where everyone's not on their phones important to you? Like, do you like the idea of having family dinners? Do you like the idea of playing board games on a Saturday morning for some amount of time? Obviously not forever. Does that matter to you? You're not going to do things just because literature tells you to do things. And if you do, your kids are going to feel like it comes from a place of kind of lecture, not from a place of protection and family values. And the difference is huge. So I'd ask yourself that. And then I think, well, what are the decisions that make sense in line with those values and what I want our family to feel like, or what I want my kids to remember? And the reason I say I'm against rigidity is not because I don't think we want to have strong guidelines, but let's say you say to yourself, we're going to start Saturday mornings with our kids without devices for a certain period of time. there's going to be a Saturday morning where you're on your phone. And to me, the thing that always gets in our way is the way we chastise ourselves. I'm the worst. So the reason I don't like rigidity is because I kind of like this duality. You should have some guidelines that you really believe in, and you should know at times you and your kids are probably going to kind of break them, and that's recoverable and part of the process. When it comes to thinking about giving your kids a device or things like that, to me, the most important thing is early on talking to other parents in your community. It's actually something I did pretty early on with my oldest, is way before our kids, were in their teenage years. We just started to meet once, or twice a year. Hey, let's just all be in communication about like, what are your policies? What do we all want? How long do we want to wait for our kids? Because when you have a group and you can remove the social isolation piece, because as much as people don't want their kids to be on a phone, people also legitimately don't want their kid to be the only kid, because then that also isn't great for your kid. But if you can early on kind of talk to other parents, and whether, some people have a pledge, other people just say, let's keep meeting every 6 months and keep talking about this and have open lines of communication. Then when your kid says, I'm the only one who doesn't have my iPad on Saturday mornings, when they're younger, well, it's actually not true. Like I kind of know, what's happening in this group.
Yeah. It's such a different mindset than from what I've heard about that with the entire thing around the digital world and setting boundaries around that. And I really feel like this entire conversation is like a complete reframe to parenting in some ways. I mentioned early on that a lot of the things that when I first read your book, it felt like almost sometimes like the opposite of what I would intuitively think to do. And I think that's really beautiful because like as we close, what would you say about like the long game of like taking this approach to parenting and like the success stories? Because it seems like a lot of it is not necessarily going to be in your kid's reaction in the moment, but something deeper over the long term.
Yeah, and I think there is something amazingly powerful short term too. When you find yourself showing up in a way that aligns with your values, and when you know you've shown up in a way that you're proud of, separate from someone's reaction, that is the ultimate powerful feeling. It always is. When you know, as a sports player, I had a great game, even though my team lost. That's what maintains confidence for you and grit, right? That you can separate what's going on and how you showed up from some external measure. So yes, while the benefits to your kid are going to be long-term, we hear from parents all the time that the benefits to themselves are immediate. They feel more confident, more capable, because when you're a parent who moves from, I hope my kid doesn't tantrum, to, if my kid tantrums in the grocery store, I actually know exactly what to do. And then one day I watch myself do that. It's the weirdest thing. You end up finding your wins in the moments that used to send you spiraling, because you're kind of saying, I'm not scared of turbulence. No pilot says I'm a bad pilot. I hit turbulence. Turbulence is part of the journey. You feel more confident when you're proud of how you handle turbulence, not when you kind of constantly swerve to avoid it. And so I want parents to know I'm a very impatient person. If there was only long-term gain with this parenting approach, I wouldn't be trying any of it myself. I'm just too short-term focused also. But that benefit of in the short term, I can kind of re-access my own trust and sturdiness inside me. I feel more connected to my kid, and I'm watching my kid build the skills they need to actually be a successful, resilient adult. It feels like a win-win-win across the board.
Is there a story or individual, either in your private practice or going through Good Inside, that you're particularly proud of over the years?
I mean, there's so many. And I think, if I think about our Good Inside members, we have members in 108 countries of the world. I mean, wow. So we hear stories from people all over the world, right? I think I can share a few stories off the top of my mind, right? So deeply feeling kids, we didn't really get to talk about, but those are, I think, my passion project within the passion project that is Good Inside. Those are kids who early on, they have really intense escalations. They're labeled dramatic or oppositional or defiant, and they're incredibly shame prone for sure. So just the other day, I heard about a kid who's deeply feeling kid entered the spelling bee at their school. And this mom was like, literally, like being in public and being in a situation where everyone can see your mistake. Like I couldn't even believe the win was just that my deeply feeling kid did that at age 9, probably working a couple years. she didn't win the spelling bee. And she said, I still braced myself when she came off the stage because I was just ready for you made me sign up for the spelling bee. It's all your fault. And you're like, I don't even know you signed up for the spelling bee. What she said to me was, I really tried my hardest. That was just a really hard word. I really tried my hardest. That was just a really hard word. I mean, I just can't even tell you, that moment doesn't just happen. That's not something that's gifted to a kid at a certain age. I know that parent. I know the way for years when there was so much shame, which leads to pointing fingers and blame and huge explosions, how she contained her kid. I know the stories she told her kid outside the moments, the skills that they practice, separating who you are from what you do, unraveling perfectionism. And then that moment, if some other parent overheard it, they might be like, oh, whatever, move on. That was 4 years in the making. And I think there's something to be realistic about, substantial change. It doesn't happen overnight. And we all have these thoughts this isn't working. This Dr. Becky doesn't know what she's talking about. But I think when you tune into truly your brain and your heart saying this just feels right and I believe in this on some level, I needed this, you do get to a moment like that where one win represents everything you've been working toward. And then more moments happen from there.
The last question I have is kind of ending where we began. And, we opened up this conversation by talking about someone who has fears of being qualified to be a parent or if they'll ever be ready. So for the parent listening who still carries that doubt, if you could leave them with one line, what would you want them to hear?
That doubt isn't your enemy, and it's not something you have to bring to a zero. Parenting, it's the essence of building the plane while you're flying the plane, right? And the fact that you feel some self-doubt, say hi to that, greet it, be curious about it. And in some ways, that self-doubt might be your best friend and encouraging you to get more support, get more education, and to totally take the shame away from having support and learning. And so to me, that's not an enemy. We don't have to bring it to zero. It can just kind of be along with us for the ride.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. This is like a masterclass in parenting.
Thank you for having
appreciate
me.
you for being here.